Ameerah, and she's going to soon talk. She is a neurodiverse coach and psychologist, and she'll talk about more about her life. But I must say, I met her through DWP, and I have a colleague at the end there who I also met in DWP, and I was struggling. And DWP, that is Department of Work and Pensions, they realized that in order to be fair, because I have dyslexia, in order to be fair to me, I needed extra help with the new work. I mean, at my age, I thought I didn't need any extra help. I'm a professional person. And so to be honest, she'll tell you a bit, I was running away from her. I was ducking and diving. She kept on sending me appointments. And I kept on saying, not now, not answering, I can't do that appointment, busy, you know, all the excuses. But DWP had paid for this package of care. And eventually, I thought, she's going to report me to them that I'm always missing appointments, so I better keep one of her appointments. And that day, I did keep the appointments. And I remember the first time we spoke, she said, are you ready to do some breathing exercises? I said, no. She said, why not? I said, because where I am, it's going to be very difficult to do any breathing. Because I thought, breathing exercise, what am I going to be doing? You know? But we spoke, and there was a connection, wasn't there? And from then on, you can see we've stayed in contact with each other. So what I'm going to say is that if you are from the Black and ethnic minority or any other group, and there is a learning need or a disability, and it doesn't matter what age, what background, how professional you are. I mean, I've worked in probation, I've worked in social work, always struggling. I've helped other people with their learning difficulties, but I wasn't helping myself. And so it was like fresh air coming in, like you could really breathe when she came to assist. And it showed me that some of the positions I had not gone for in management was because of dyslexia, because I didn't know how to overcome it or work with it and project myself. So, without much further ado.
Oh, thank you so much, Ibironke. It's been such a pleasure working with you and getting to know you personally as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's my first time in Peterborough in a long time. I'm really grateful to be here at the Methodist Church today. And thank you to everyone for showing up. So I'm going to be giving a talk today on lived experiences of neurodiversity. So just to tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Ameerah Khan. I've born and brought up in East London. I'm a very proud East Londoner. And my background, my parents are from the BAME community. So my father is Pakistani. He was born in Pakistan and came over here to the country when he was a teenager. And my mum is from Zimbabwe, and in those days, Rhodesia. So we spent a lot of our younger years in Zimbabwe, and it's got, oh, what's happening? Yeah, and lots of really fond memories there, and lots of strong family connections still in Zimbabwe, Uganda. So my parents met in the UK, in London, and settled here. So we were all brought up in here and in the UK, and it's been a really interesting experience being, born in '88, and there was always a feeling of somewhat being a little bit different. So my parents, we spoke Urdu at home, and that was my first language, and my sisters first language and only language was Urdu. It's interesting because my mom actually, the only language that she really spoke was English. Growing up in colonial Zimbabwe, that's what she spoke, the Queen's English. But she learned and she taught us all Urdu. And it was really interesting that my sisters went to school without speaking English. And they learned that, at school. And at home, we only spoke Urdu as well. And there was such a difference in cultures at home compared to going at school. And there was, often a feeling of not quite fitting in, or maybe some underlying feelings of shame, or feeling like, my way was wrong. The sandwiches that I was bringing into school weren't quite, correct, or some of my, our cultural differences of, well, we brought up making eye contact was considered really rude with your elders. I don't know if that's similar in your community, but, at school, growing up in a predominantly white culture, eye contact is considered a sign of respect. So there are certain, cultural nuances that played a part in always making me feel a little bit odd. But then over the years that evolved and that changed, and it's interesting to think about what I had to let go of or sacrifice over the years about parts of who I am in order to progress, and then the journey of reclaiming those parts of myself as well and understanding my journey. So anyway, enough about me. I'll just tell you a little bit about what I do professionally. So I'm a psychologist, so I'm not a clinical psychologist or a therapist. I have studied psychology across 2 degrees, an undergraduate and a master's, and I specialise in occupational, so that's the workplace psychology. And my specialism is neurodiversity. So today I'm going to be talking about some of my experiences as a neurodiversity coach and some of my beloved clients. And I've been running my practice as a neurodiverse coach for 6 years, so hopefully I can shed some light on some of your experiences as well. So what I'm going to encourage is that we have a bit of a discussion as well. So it's not just so boring half an hour of someone talking at you, because that's not fun for anybody. So let's just get started by talking about what neurodiversity is. So does anybody know what neurodiversity is? Yep. Yeah. Yeah, perfect, beautiful. It's an umbrella term. So it essentially is encapsulating things such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, even mental health differences as well. So anxiety, depression, bipolar, even Tourette's. These will all fall under the umbrella of neurodiversity. So all diversity, I think we can agree that all diversity is a good thing. We want it in the world. We need diversity in the world, just like racial diversity, biodiversity. We need this in the world. And neurodiversity is actually quite common. It's about 20% of the population is neurodiverse. So that suggests that there is an evolutionary advantage to it. So it suggests that we actually do need it. It hasn't died down. And that begs the question as to why? Why hasn't it died down? So neurodiverse thinkers are different in the way that their brain is organized. So research shows us that the brain actually communicates in a different way to a neurotypical brain. And that's because there are extreme strengths and also extreme challenges. So there is something called the spiky profile. Now, Ibironke, did we talk about the spiky profile? We didn't. Well, we didn't go into it. But does anybody know what the spiky profile is? I think Sonia might know the spiky profile. No. So the spiky profile is a way of mapping out the strengths and challenges in a neurodiverse thinker. So I don't have a visual, but maybe we can pass this around at some point. So who here considers themselves neurotypical? So Sonia, yeah. Anybody else neurotypical? No? You're dyslexic. No. So neurotypical is anybody who is not neurodiverse. So if you're not dyslexic, dyspraxic, ADHD, or have autism, if you consider yourself to be neurotypical. So yeah, lovely. Yeah, yeah. So neurodiverse. So dyspraxia is a type of neurodiversity which has got to do with spatial awareness. So yeah. So yeah. Okay. So we've got majority of people here who would say that they are neurotypical. I would say so, about half and half maybe. So if you were to meet with an assessor and have somebody do a profile of your cognitive or your thinking or your intelligence, what you'd find is that there would be a natural variation, because there always is a variation. But the variation wouldn't be huge. It would be sort of in, the rough same area. However, if you're neurodiverse, what you would find is that there are very significant variations between your strengths and your challenges. So you would find great strengths in areas such as verbal comprehension or your ability to communicate with others. You may be really creative, you may be a very strong leader, you may have lots of out-of-the-box ideas, be very innovative. However, there would also be similar massive challenges. Okay, so these challenges would be things like your memory. So your working memory, your ability to remember instructions, your ability to continue on tasks. When somebody is talking to you, can you actually retain the information when they're speaking to you? Your ability to process information. So how long does it take you to understand what somebody is saying to you? Or how long does it take you to understand material in school? Maybe it takes you 2 weeks, and it might take somebody else 2 days. Maybe it takes you 6 months. So there is a difference in these processing speeds and the working memory and also the strengths. And what we find that society is so, it's so geared towards everyone being the same across the board. So there isn't that much room for people who present as different. And society also focuses on the negatives. So we'll often just notice, well, this person, they're not listening to the instructions in the classroom, or this person is very easily distracted. But what you're not really realizing is that person, this child in the classroom has this incredible imagination, and they're coming up with solutions, or, they're the next new mathematician of the future, or, creator and engineer, but all we can do is sit with them in the classroom and tell them off for not paying attention. So what I wanted to move on in and talk about is, what does it actually look like if you are neurodiverse? So can anybody spot any traits or things that they might identify as with somebody who's neurodiverse? Any things that you might look out for? And feel free to stereotype. It's fine. Yeah. Communication difficulties, yeah. So can you say a bit more about that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the process it, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we've got, the speech, the difference in communication style. Yeah. And also you talked about the, coming into the room and sort of hunching in. Does anybody know what that might be about? I think we're specifically talking about autism here. I think we've got a few nods here, so yeah. Do you know what that might be about? No? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm very cruel. So one of the things that we notice with neurodiversity, especially with autism, is sensory overload. So for us, for the majority of the people in this room, and I say for us, I'm actually neurodiverse myself. but I sort of put myself in both camps from time to time. If we're in a room like this with lots of lights, and if we had music playing, for some of us that might be absolutely fine. If you're particularly sensitive, and say, for example, if you do have autism, that can be unbearable for some. It can feel as if the light is penetrating through you. It can feel like the noise is really disrupting your thinking process. It can actually be quite physically painful. So that's one of the things that you may expect to see in an individual in their experience as well. Anything else, for example? Yeah. Yeah, so a desire to, stick to routines as well. That can be presented as well. Yeah. Hyperactivity, yes, exactly. So in ADHD, that can come across as being really disruptive in a classroom. But what's really going on in that child's mind when they're being hyperactive? I mean, their mind could be reeling off a whole new book. They could be, I don't know, running a whole new story in their head, or, bringing up, having all the energy to come up with a new idea. So, but, as society, we look at these individuals as deviants, as disrupting the status quo. Hello. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And this is something we see all the time. I see all the time with clients who are, so if anybody didn't hear, we talked about perfectionism and also overcompensating. So being very aware of your difference, of being very aware of the challenges, and then trying to make up for it by putting in extra work, working longer hours, trying to conceal your mistakes, out of shame, out of embarrassment, and out of fear of not wanting to be seen. So there's two sides to neurodiversity, and that's what I really want to get you to start thinking about today. Is what is it that the society sees, and then what is actually going on in that individual's world, and how does society impact that individual sense of self? Okay, so when we judge somebody who's demonstrating different behaviors or problematic behaviors in the classroom or at home, maybe you've got a child that's very argumentative, or maybe you've got a child that's very impulsive who just wants to leave the house and run away, and when we take a step back and actually take a moment to think, well, what's really going on with this child? Is it that they are bad? Is it that they're not doing their homework because they're lazy? Is it that they just don't care and they've got an attitude problem? Or is there something different going on? And I can speak for my community and say that there is a lot of shame and stigma attached to thinking about other explanations for deviant behavior or different presentations of behavior. But actually, sometimes the answer is that the child is neurodiverse and they need some attention and they need an assessment. And if you do ever suspect that, I really do encourage you to have a chat with the child, or have a chat with somebody in your community about what their inner experience is. And I think it will surprise you. So I've put a few cards on your tables, and these are actually some quotes from clients about their inner experience of what it's like to be neurodiverse. So I'd just like you to take a moment to have a look at these and have a discussion with each other about times when maybe you felt the same emotion as well, And maybe think about when and in what circumstances these individuals might have felt that way. So I've got a couple here. I've got an emotion here called, neglect. And I think we've all, at some point in our life, felt neglect, some more than others. And I wonder what was happening in this person's life for them to feel neglected. Now, imagine you have a disability or a difference and your needs are not being met. And you really, really need that help. But when we think about neurodiversity, it's a hidden disability or it's a hidden difference. So the world will treat you the same, but your needs are not being met. So say, for example, with autism, if you go into a room and there is so much sensory overload and you're being expected to give a presentation in front of 100 people, which is one of my autistic students yesterday. She's expected to give a presentation, at university to 100 people. And she has a care plan in place at the university, but nobody's really advocating for her. And one of the things that struck me is that she may be feeling neglect in that moment, and that neglect may have been a pattern in her life as well from a very young child. So I just want to if you can just take a moment to have a look at the cards in front of you, take a couple of minutes, have a discussion, and have a think about when you might have felt some of these emotions, and when somebody who's neurodiverse might have felt them as well. So let's give you a couple of minutes.
We all said different things, but I'll start with myself. So first we spoke about when we have felt these emotions, but then we started disclosing as well that two of us are almost we're quite sure that we have either a neurodivergence or some kind of disability. It's just some of it's undiagnosed. Yeah. So when I was younger, secondary school, I think you'd always said that they thought I had mild learning difficulties, but they never bothered to assess further. And only recently I was actually at work, and a neurodiversity coach and somebody who assesses people came and said, "Can you write that again?" And I did something, and she did a few mini tasks, and she's like, "I think you're dyspraxic." And she started asking me about time, space, and I remember saying, if you understand my lateness and how I have tried everything under the sun, or my lack of direction. When I tell people I'm scared to learn to drive, it's just you're being lazy, you're not confronting your fear. And I'm no, I never bothered to learn my left and right. It wasn't really valuable information for me. I just have ways to work it out. But so we were discussing these kind of things and how we navigate it. So I was just looking, one thing we spoke about was we've all felt these emotions, but then
Can I just ask you for a moment, what was your experience of people feeding back to you that you just couldn't be bothered to learn your left and right, for example, or you were, you're just late because, I don't know, making all these assumptions about you? What was that like for you?
I think I'm someone who can take trauma and make it very humorous. So I used to make jokes. So I'd be I'm an African, I've decolonized time. For you guys, time is money. For me, time is time, I'm living my life. So the way I would explain it is, and I also saw don't apologize for being late, say thank you for being patient with me. Yeah. So I'd spin it oh, thank you so much, you had the grace to wait for me. Yeah. I really appreciate you meeting me today. Oh, you're always late, you don't value my time. And I'd say if I didn't value your time, I wouldn't come. It's just, you see time as money. For me, time is not a transaction. It's about how we're spending it. And I'm a people person, so I'll appeal to the person. But like the time thing gets a lot of people stressed. But it's like, it stresses me more than it stresses them.
Yeah.
So I just stop stressing about it. And I just
Yeah.
joke about it. Or like with, you know, like lack of direction. I just joke about it. I'm like, no one's gonna steal me. I'll talk to my kidnapper, we'll have a laugh. Like, I'll get back home fine. So it's just things that I like. I think I use humor to just
Wonderful,
like get over
wonderful
it. Yeah.
coping techniques.
But
And if
the
I
other
can,
said,
if I can, I know I don't want to interrupt you too much, but if I can just say that is a very typical, beautiful way of coping with some of the challenges. So that what we find with neurodiversity and dyspraxia as well, huge sense of humour, fantastic empathy, really good people skills, and these are the kind of qualities that make great leaders and make great managers and make really great employees and people in society. And then at the same time, if we look at what actually happens in the workplace, do you work? Yeah, okay. So has that presented at work as an issue for you? Right, can you share with us what's happened?
so in the job I currently work, one thing like that I explain to them, I'm like, I'm not a morning person. And then they assume that it's just, oh, she's just lazy. And I let them run with that if that's what they want. But sometimes I'll explain like, no, just historically I've always studied at night, which is true. So by the time it gets to morning, I'm tired and it's like, it's not that I can't be bothered, it's just, I know I'm gonna be late. I'm saving you by telling you, let's do this later. I'm saving you the stress of getting upset with me.
Yeah.
So it's like, I explain that, but you know, I do try my best, or like I use other mechanisms. But one thing as well that I've learned is like to be over early, because an example, if I look at a journey and it's an hour, for me to get there on time, I must stress myself 2 hours before. So I'd rather be there very early, because if I try to get there on time, I'll be late.
Gonna happen. Yeah.
Like, I'll be late. So I have to be very early or I'm late. Like, there's no in between.
Yeah. And
so, yeah.
And as we can just see, like, this is such, this time takes up a lot of your mental energy. Yeah, it takes up a lot of your headspace. And what if we could just take away that pressure for you to be on time, and that you could go into the world and just be your fabulous self and just using all of your strengths instead. And if there were adjustments in place for you at work, for example, to say you turn up between this time and that time, maybe between 8 and 12, when you want to turn, when it's convenient for you to turn up, and depending on whether you're having a good day or a bad day. I wonder what difference that would make to you.
A lot of difference.
Yeah.
Because even when I was given the option, this was a bit of an adjustment, I think, because of COVID. When we worked from home, it was the first time I was told, you can either do 9 to 5 or 10 to 6. And I was like, 10 to 6,
10 to
definitely.
6, yeah.
And then even like sometimes they'll say, you can come to the office, but as long as you leave by this time, you can come like any time before 12. That's very helpful as well. Because then there's not the same, like I'll still get there, I'll do all my work. Sometimes I forfeit my breaks, like I do other things to show that I'm actually very committed.
Yeah.
But like the 9, 8 a.m. thing, I'm not with it. Like, and when I come, I will be my best self, but I'm not gonna have the energy or the ideas. So it's almost like, what's the point? Like until 12, I haven't even loaded anyway. Like I'm still downloading.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you want to carry on saying what you were saying about the cards
no, I was just going to
well?
say that. So we were just speaking about like this and like different things. It was just like more recently when somebody like said, oh, we think you're dyspraxic. And then I was saying, but how? And they were like, do you find you do well at school and this and that and the other? And I said, yeah, I'm quite good with like things that are literature based, wordy, numbers are my problem, really struggle with numbers. But it then makes sense with time and space and maps, and that's all quite mathematical, and I really struggle with that side of things. But anything that's people-centered, the humanities or those things, I'm very good with those things.
Yeah.
So I just say to people that I'm making much extra effort to learn the other side, because my brain just doesn't work that way. But we all had kind of really different experiences of similar things. So yeah, I just wanted to say we also spoke, so it will be good for them to.
So you've all had similar, so you all relate with that neurodiverse, yeah. Do you mind sharing some of your experience?
Sure. For example, I discovered that I was having a learning disability at a very late age, around like when I was 16. That's when I discovered I had a learning disability, like dysgraphia.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know about it.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the opposite of dyslexia. So during like, for example, primary school and middle school, no one like understood why I was writing that way. Like, for example, my mum always shouting at me, like saying, "What's going on? Why can't you write like a normal person?" And even my teachers as well.
And how did that, if you don't mind sharing, what was that like, if you can connect with that child? What was that like for you to hear?
I didn't know how to explain because I was just a child. I was saying, "This is how I write. I can't, I can't do more." Like,
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were really bad at like understanding me, and that's when I understood that, you know, people don't take time to try to understand you. Like, for example, when I worked in a kindergarten, nursery, yeah, that's what you call it. Yeah. It was a child that he was kind of like very neglected because he was very quiet, not like not very energetic like the other the kids. So one day I was just asked them, like, why is he always by himself? Like, it's just like it. I was like, nah, I don't think he likes to be by himself. So I took some time, went up to him and started introducing myself, and after that, you know, by trying to understand him and trying to give him some time, we ended up being best friends. So yeah, and then it ended up like his mum thanking me a lot about the work I did as well, and yeah, it just shows you how much that our society tends to put people in boxes, and like if you don't behave that way, or if you're not like everyone else, you'll be considered as abnormal.
Yeah,
Or just
and
neglected.
dismissed. And what I loved about what you said about your beautiful friendship was that you went to that boy and you gave him time.
Yeah, I gave him time. I gave him like
and space.
Like here I am. Like
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Basically, that because for them it was like, if not everyone is the same, that means that we don't have time to, you know, put some effort. And the fact that maybe in that particular kindergarten it was mostly women that was working there as well. So he was trying to also find a way to connect with someone who's manly figure, for example. That's one of the reasons why even they hired me there. So it was because especially the boys were not really like understanding, the women that were working there as well, because it was too much of the same way of approaching things. And also they were just very stressful all the time. They were just running all over the place, not giving time.
If I can just put in some insight and some feedback to you as well. So your skills seem to be in people as well. So there was something about the dysgraphia that has potentially allowed you to see something that others have missed.
Yeah.
So you were able to connect with this young person as well. And
Yeah.
so what we notice with neurodiversity is that there is very high emotional intelligence and very high empathy and very high innovation and very high creativity. So it's an actual specialist thinker, so specialist thinking skills, and that's why it's evolved. So thank you so much, Ashley. That's
welcome.
wonderful. And did you want to share as well?
Okay, for me, it's being naughty, because even as a child and up till now, most people think I'm naughty because I'm kind of opinionated. And when I make my opinion known, I give you reasons to say it, and which is very difficult to convince me most times. People get to like, oh no, you're just too much. You don't want to listen to anyone. But at the end, they come back to me to say, oh, what you were saying the other day, you were right. Which my dad too is like that. They just tell me you're too stubborn. You only understood your ways, and whatever you want is what you want. But later they come back. But I see that as, I don't know, maybe because I think too much. I can overthink things. I think it through, then I'm like, okay, this way, this way, this way. So which way is the final? Then I just pick it up and stick to it. But at the end, I think most of them now sees me like, okay, maybe you can be my counselor. So when they're going through something, they could easily contact me to say, oh, Mutiat, I'm going through this and that. What do you think? Which I think is a good one on my part. It might be like they don't like it. People see it as maybe I'm being stereotyped, or I just don't like certain things. But I feel like it is me, and it is it's not like I've got too much experience to say, oh, I've got so much experience than every other person, not even my dad. But because most times I just see things the way they are, and I just wanted to follow through the processes.
And you said that I think too much.
Yeah.
What's that like? Can I ask, is it ADHD? Do you have? No?
I'm not sure.
You don't know? Okay, so because I thought you said you all had some neurodiversities. Okay, so what's that like for you when you think too much?
Yeah, I might not get the right answer instantly. It might take me days. Just think through. If someone acts to me in a way now, I have to go home, even though it's just something that the person does not even know it matters. But I might go home thinking, why does that person actually did that? Then I begin to think, have I offended her? Did I do something good? Did I do something bad?
Yeah.
Then I begin to think, then I arrive and like, so, okay, this was what happened.
So overthinking,
Continuously.
ruminating, continuously, yeah. And what card did you have? I was wondering, what card did you have for the emotions? Which ones did you relate to?
Emotions, yeah. Behavior, this is behavior.
What did that say?
Being naughty and deviance.
Being naughty and deviant. Okay, so that's a lovely example of how your external behavior can seem problematic. So people may have been looking at you and judging you and saying, well, you know, she's naughty.
Yeah.
And she's deviant.
A lot of people say that.
But actually, what's going on inside of her is all of this anxiety and overthinking.
Yes.
And maybe there's something, I mean, I think that's a really relatable experience for anybody who, I mean, I think all human beings can relate to, I mean, we can all relate to you know, being misunderstood. And that's one of the key things that happens in neurodiversity is being misunderstood. It's having behaviors externally, such as interrupting in class, not handing your homework in on time, being chased for deadlines, missing appointments, you know, seeming as somebody who just doesn't care, is disorganized, but actually is, in reality, is actually struggling quite a lot, and really, really do care. So thank you so much for sharing that. We heard so much from this really exciting table. Is there anybody else who wants to share before we move on? Yeah.
Thank you, Ameerah. Yes, so when we were having our own discussion, we had sympathy, but I said I can relate more to empathy. And for me, personally, empathy is sensory. Yes, so if someone else is in pain, I do feel pain physically, you know, and it could be in my leg or, you know, my body. But if someone is hurting emotionally, I can actually, you know, feel that as well. So I'm thinking maybe I need to do an assessment after this.
Yeah, I mean, being an empath is something which is such a beautiful skill, but it can also in itself be quite a burden if you don't know how to manage it. Yeah. And it's something that, you know, neurodiverse individuals feel a lot. So one of the myths about autism is that autistic individuals don't feel much. What a load of rubbish, if you don't mind me saying. Absolutely not true. And I work with autism day in, day out, and what my experience is the actual complete opposite. It's that they feel more than your typical individual. They're actually more empathetic. It's just that they may not relate. They may not have the ability to relate to experiences and to the world in the same way. But the feelings and the emotions are there, highly, highly sensitive, highly, highly sensitive. I often say to parents of autistic children, if you want to understand your child a little bit more, if you want to you know, support them with some strategies, there's a really good book called Highly Sensitive Children. Even though, you know, it's not specifically for autism, but it's actually very insightful. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else before we move on to some case studies? Oh, lovely, at the back. Yeah, wonderful.
I've come in late, so I'm not actually sure what the question was. But I'm just going to touch on, someone mentioned about time and timekeeping.
Yep.
So I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was at university. So I have had a diagnosis, but I'm always late, but it's literally 5-10 minutes late, and I just can't break that cycle.
Yeah.
So is that associated with all dyslexia?
Absolutely, absolutely it is. Do you know why that is with dyslexia? Do you
I've
understand?
got no idea. I mean, I can get up 3 hours earlier. I mean, even today I'm late again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'll just explain a little bit of the science behind it. So what we have, because this is a very, very common experience, and thank you so much for sharing that, and it is one that brings a lot of shame, and not just shame for the individual, but a lot of scrutiny from society as well, because society really values, especially in the British culture, timekeeping is something that is very, very highly valued, and it's a wonderful attribute. But actually, sometimes it's incredibly difficult. So, when we're developing our brains, when as we grow and we develop, the last part of the brain to develop is this front part here, called the prefrontal cortex, and over here we have these different functions called executive functions. Okay, now the executive functions are the ones that are required for us to operate in the modern world. Okay, so these were the last parts to develop in evolution as well. So, for example, time management is over here. Emotional regulation. Anyone know what that means? Yeah. If something happens, if somebody is, if you're driving and somebody cuts you up, as they did on my way over here, completely regulated. So I could get, that could elicit a really strong, angry response. So the emotional regulation is not about not having emotions, it's about how quickly can you calm down. Are you going to be so angry that you're going to get up into road rage and cause an accident, or are you going to just and then calm down again? So how quickly can you regulate yourself? So that's here as well. We've got organisation over here as well. So how to, organise your desk, or your folders, or your school books, or your homework, or your university assignments. This is all over here. So we've got about 11, depending on which model you're with. Now, neurodiverse individuals' brains develop at a different rate than your neurotypicals. And often we find that some of these parts at the front haven't fully developed, okay? And that is why it presents in that way. The good news is that the brain, there's plasticity in the brain, which means that it can evolve and change, and we can learn new things. And that's why coaching and practice with the right support can mean that you can learn new skills at any age. The best time is when you're young. So up until 25, that is when there is the most potential to change and learn new skills. Personally, for me, I found the best thing for me was after 25, because at 25, the brain essentially stops moving, it slows down a lot, and everything kind of calms down again. And then if you're in the right environment, for me, I went into the workplace and I was trained by a CEO of a company. Actually, I wasn't 25, I was 22, so probably quite a good age. And he taught me loads about organisation, time management, and it changed my life, honestly. I learned so many skills from being, mentored by somebody. And these were skills that didn't exist for me at all at school. I was constantly in trouble. I was always told off. I was always the naughty one. I was like, but I'm really good, I promise. But, that's not how the teachers saw me. They just saw me as Ameerah. Oh, she doesn't have her keys. Oh, she forgot her notes today. She's late again. And it wasn't for lack of trying or because I was a bad child. I was actually struggling with a neurological difference. Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk about some case studies. Oh, actually, before I move on to the case studies, I just wanted to say, so what can you do when you're left with these feelings? So imagine, as a neurodiverse person, you're getting this feedback from society and from yourself, not just once, but day in, day out, by virtue of being who you are. Now, that can really leave you with feelings of shame and actually a lot of trauma as well, which can make you feel like you're not worthy and feel quite, feel quite small about yourself. Now, if you don't feel worthy in life, if you think about where you are in your career, does that mean that you're going to push yourself for that promotion? Or if you're going to apply for that job? Or if you're going to take a risk? No, because you've been told that you're not worthwhile, and even if you do try, you'll probably fail. So what I really encourage you to do is to work on building self-esteem and surrounding yourself by people who really believe in you. I really, and if it's for you or if it's for somebody else, be a friend to the person who is neurodiverse, be a cheerleader, be a supporter, listen to what they've got to say. I really believe in something called the growth mindset. A show of hands if you've ever heard of it. Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, we often believe in fixed ideas about ourselves. So, for example, I give up. It's too hard. I give up can become, I'll keep trying. Okay, I don't have to completely give up. I'll keep trying. It's good enough. What I've done is good enough. Becomes, is this really my best work? Can I keep going? And I'll never get this. With a little help, I can get this. That's what that becomes. So I really do suggest that it's very important to really support yourself with some compassionate awareness. Speak to a therapist, speak to a friend, be an ear to somebody, don't judge, forgive yourselves for your mistakes, and be aware of that inner critic and what narrative or what voice you've internalized. Often we've internalized the voices of our teachers, or our parents, or critical friends. Try and rewrite that and do that with a really kind and gentle and encouraging voice. And I really do believe that can make the biggest difference. So I am aware of the time, Ibironke, so we can probably wrap up. I've got a few case studies, but I think everyone really needs a break right now. Yeah. So I'm going to just hand over to you. So thank you, everyone, for listening to this talk. Any questions? No? Okay.
Just to say thank you so much. It's been very informative, and maybe we can do a case study at the end, but we can have a break, but we'll let another speaker come on, then we can come back to a case study. So if we want to have a comfort break or reflection break, that would be good. I would say we've got about, 5 minutes. We'll come back.